In the damp silence of a Georgia cellar, they found him sitting upright, eyes open, lips sealed, surrounded by 3 blood-stained blades and no voice to explain. They called him Silas the Silent. But in the plantation's whispers, his name meant something darker: punishment, retribution, and fear made flesh. Silas arrived at Coldwater Plantation in the summer of 1838, a towering young man with eyes too calm for a slave auction. He was purchased not for labor, but for novelty. Rumor said he hadn't spoken a word since childhood. The traders called him Mute, but the overseer, Gant, gave him a new name: Silas. The mistress, Evelyn Coldwater, found him unsettling. He moved without sound, obeyed before being ordered, and seemed to understand more than any man with no tongue should. Some nights, she claimed she saw him standing beneath her window long after curfew, his face turned toward the moon, his lips moving as though whispering to something unseen. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from, because what happens next will change how you see silence forever. By harvest season, Silas had become a favorite among the other slaves. He could calm horses no one dared touch and predict storms days before they came. The other slaves said he was listening, not with ears, but with something deeper. When he fixed his gaze on a person, it felt like confession. But then came Master Coldwater's mistake. After a night of bourbon and cruelty, he decided to test Silas in ways no man should be tested. The next morning, the plantation doctor was summoned. The master was found in his quarters, pale, shaking, and forever changed. The official word was accident. The whispers said otherwise. They said Silas didn't run. He stood there as the master screamed, and when it was over he went back to work, blood on his hands, expression unchanged. Evelyn demanded he be whipped. The overseer refused. He said, "Ma'am, if we touch him, we'll all die." That night, something strange happened. The sound of every animal on the property stopped. The crickets, the owls, the dogs, all fell silent at once. The next morning, Silas was in the field again, working as if nothing had happened. From that day, no one spoke his name aloud. They called him the Silent One and prayed he'd never look their way. If you lived on that plantation, would you have stayed or run? When the harvest moon rose the following month, the air over Coldwater Plantation felt heavy, as if sound itself had grown tired. Master Coldwater's 2 sons, Abel and Henry, returned from Charleston to find their father bedridden, trembling, and refusing to speak. They demanded answers. None came. Evelyn met them at the veranda, her eyes hollow and gray. "It was the Mute," she whispered. "That creature cursed your father." The brothers laughed. "A slave cursed a man like him?" Abel said. "Then let's see how strong that curse truly is." Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from, because what these brothers did next became the most whispered warning in Georgia's plantation country. They ordered Silas brought to the barn at midnight. The torches flickered as they surrounded him, taunting him to speak, to beg, to show fear. But Silas stood still, tall, expressionless, his bare chest gleaming in the torchlight. He never blinked. The only sound was the distant moan of wind through the cotton fields. Henry struck him first. Abel followed. But before the second blow could land, the lantern light dimmed, a sudden darkness swallowing the rafters above. The horses began thrashing in their stalls. One of them broke loose, screaming like it had seen something unnatural. Moments later, the barn doors flew open. No one saw what happened next, but the screams echoed across the entire plantation, sharp, short, and wet. By dawn, the 2 brothers were found alive, but unmanned. The doctor's cart arrived again, the same as before. Evelyn fainted at the sight. The overseer refused to go near the bodies. When he finally did, he said something that chilled everyone. It wasn't done with a blade, it was done with hands. That morning, Silas returned to his cabin as if he'd merely finished a chore. His clothes were clean, his gaze distant, and his silence deeper than ever. Evelyn demanded vengeance. but who would carry it out? The field hands wouldn't. The overseer wouldn't. Even the sheriff turned his horse around when he reached the gate, muttering that the land felt wrong. By the next week, Evelyn stopped asking. The master's sons were gone from sight, and the house that once sang with laughter became a tomb of whispers. No one knew why Silas stayed. Some said he waited for the next man who'd try. Others believed he was something older, something that simply wore a man's skin to punish those who didn't understand the price of silence. Tell me in the comments, do you believe this was justice, or something far darker? After the master's sons vanished from the fields and the household fell into silence, a new kind of fear took root. The slaves worked quietly, eyes low, their songs gone. Even the crows that once circled the property stopped coming. But there was one man who still believed Silas could be broken, Overseer Gant. Gant was not a man of faith or fear. He was a brute who measured worth in obedience and pain. He'd watched the plantation slide into superstition, watched the mistress drink herself sick in her room, watched Silas move like a shadow between rows of cotton that no one else dared to walk. Gant had had enough. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from, because what Gant did next became legend among those who survived Coldwater Plantation. One blistering afternoon, Gant called Silas to the whipping post. "You think you're untouchable?" he sneered. "You think you can scare God-fearing men?" The other slaves gathered in silence. Silas did not move. The overseer's whip cracked once, the sound slicing through the heavy air like lightning. Silas didn't flinch. The second strike came harder. Still nothing. The third strike never landed. The whip froze mid-air, caught in Silas's hand. No one saw him move. What happened next was described differently by every witness, but they all agreed on one thing. The wind stopped, the birds fled, and the earth itself seemed to tilt. Gant's body went rigid. His mouth opened, but no sound came. His eyes rolled back, and when he fell, his throat was bleeding from the inside, though no blade had touched him. The slaves ran. Some said Silas had whispered something in Gant's ear before he dropped. Others claimed they heard nothing but the faint hum of wind rushing through the trees. When the mistress found out, she didn't cry or pray. She locked herself in her bedroom and ordered Silas chained, but the men sent to do it refused. "He ain't human," one said. "He don't bleed right." By the next morning, Gant's body was gone. Only his boots remained, sitting neatly by the door of Silas's cabin, polished clean. That night, the plantation dogs began howling again, but not toward the woods, toward the big house. Inside, Evelyn Coldwater awoke to find Silas standing at the foot of her bed, silent, unmoving, his shadow stretching across the wall like a cross. Would you have spoken to him, or prayed for him to stay silent? By autumn, the Coldwater estate had become a hollow shell. The cotton rotted in the fields. The workers whispered prayers instead of songs. And inside the mansion, Mistress Evelyn sat alone among her dead husband's portraits, clutching a glass of bourbon and a Bible she never opened. Silas haunted her, not through sound, but through presence. She felt him before she saw him, a shadow in the corner of her eye, a shape in the doorway when no one should be there. Every creak in the hallway seemed to carry his name, though no lips spoke it. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from, because what she did next blurred the line between desperation and madness. Late one stormy evening, Evelyn summoned Silas to her chamber. Her hands trembled as she poured him a glass of brandy. "Sit," she whispered. He didn't move. "Please," she begged. "I know you understand me." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Silas did something that terrified her more than any act of violence ever could. He smiled. It was small, almost gentle, but in that silence it felt like a verdict. Evelyn began to weep. "They said you were cursed," she said. "That something inside you came from hell, but I don't believe that. I think God sent you here to punish me." She reached for him. He stepped back. Her hand lingered in the air, trembling. "Tell me what you want," she pleaded. "Tell me how to stop this." Silas said nothing. Instead, he walked to the window and pointed toward the old slave quarters, where a faint light flickered in the dark. Then he left, wordless, soundless, as thunder rolled through the valley. Evelyn followed his silent command. She went to the quarters alone, barefoot, her gown dragging through mud and rain. Inside, she found the fire still burning, and something carved into the wall above the hearth. 3 words, deep and uneven: "Let them free." The next morning, Evelyn gathered the remaining slaves and announced they were no longer bound. "You may go," she said, her voice quivering. "This land is cursed, and I will not hold you in it." But no one moved. They stared past her, to where Silas stood beneath the great oak, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The ground beneath him rippled, as if something beneath the soil had finally awakened. That night, Evelyn dreamed of blood dripping from cotton blossoms and a voice, calm, low, and familiar, whispering from the dark, "Freedom has a price." Would you have trusted that voice, or run before dawn? The night Evelyn freed the slaves, thunder broke like cannon fire above Coldwater Plantation. The sky churned black and red, the air thick with rain and ash. Some said lightning struck the main barn first. Others swore they saw a man, tall, silent, walking through the storm with a lantern that never went out. By midnight, the plantation was ablaze. Flames swallowed the cotton fields, climbing up the fences like fingers reaching for the stars. The smell of burning hay, flesh, and old secrets filled the valley. Evelyn stumbled barefoot through the smoke, calling for help that would never come. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from, because what happened next is one of the most haunting tales in Georgia's forgotten history. No one saw Silas start the fire, but everyone knew he was inside it. He moved through the burning stables with purpose, cutting the ropes that bound the horses, breaking open the locked doors where the remaining slaves slept. His face was calm, his eyes reflecting the inferno like molten mirrors. At the far end of the yard, the overseer's quarters exploded into flame. Witnesses later claimed they saw Silas standing there, motionless, untouched by heat or smoke. The fire parted around him like a curtain, as though even the flames obeyed his silence. Evelyn reached him then, her dress smoldering, her skin streaked with soot. "Silas!" she screamed. "It's enough! It's done!" For the first time, he looked at her, truly looked. His expression wasn't anger, it was sorrow. The kind of sorrow that comes from knowing justice too late. He stepped forward, and Evelyn fell to her knees, clutching his arm, begging forgiveness. He knelt beside her, and the world seemed to pause. The roar of the fire dimmed, the rain slowed. Then, with the gentlest motion, he pressed his hand to her heart. She gasped once, and was still. Her body did not burn. It simply turned cold. When the fire finally died by dawn, the plantation was gone. Only ashes and a single standing oak remained. Beneath it lay 3 things: Evelyn's locket, a broken whip, and Silas's bloodless footprints leading into the woods. Some say he died that night. Others believe he walked into the storm and never stopped. That he became something older, something the wind itself learned to obey. And on quiet nights, when the air is too still and the crickets hold their breath, the people of Coldwater swear they can hear him again, the soundless tread of a man who never spoke, but whose silence screamed forever. Would you have faced him, or hidden in the fire's glow? By the time Sheriff Amos Kettering arrived at Coldwater Plantation, there was little left but smoke and ruin. The air still carried the sting of burned cotton, and the soil glowed faintly where the fire had refused to die. He dismounted his horse slowly, his boots sinking into ash that was strangely warm beneath the surface. The sheriff had seen plenty of death before, duels, hangings, massacres, but nothing like this. The plantation looked as though it had burned from the inside out. No tracks led in or out, except one trail of footprints that stopped abruptly at the tree line. Bare feet, large, human. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from, because what the sheriff found next was sealed in county records until long after his death. Inside the mansion's remains, he discovered the body of Evelyn Coldwater, unburned, untouched, and pale as marble. Her eyes were open, fixed toward the window, where the first light of dawn crept in. Her heart had stopped, but her body was cold long before the fire reached her. The coroner wrote, "Death by shock or divine judgment, uncertain." Kettering walked the grounds for hours. The wind blew softly through the ruins, carrying faint whispers, or maybe just the crackle of cooling timber. Then he found the cellar door. It had survived, blackened but unbroken. When he opened it, the stench hit him, not of smoke, but of metal, sweat, and something old. The cellar was lined with chains, but every one of them was empty, the iron warped and bent as if something had pulled free with inhuman strength. On the wall, scratched deep into the stone, was a single phrase, "Silence is mercy." Kettering left that day with trembling hands. He filed his report, burned his notes, and told the county clerk the fire was an accident, but his deputy later claimed the sheriff had stopped sleeping. He'd wake screaming at night, shouting that he heard footsteps outside his window, slow, deliberate, and close. A year later, Kettering vanished. His horse was found by the riverbank. His boots stood neatly beside it, polished and clean, just like the overseer's had been. The official story ended there, but the people of Coldwater knew better. They said Silas didn't die in that fire. He changed, became the silence that haunts every man who tries to own another. So, tell me, do you think the sheriff saw a ghost, or justice walking on two legs? After the Coldwater fire, the surrounding counties began to whisper. Travelers passing through the region reported something strange. Nights without sound, no owls, no crickets, no frogs singing near the swamps. The silence would fall without warning and last for hours. Even the wind would stop. People said it was the breath of Silas still moving across Georgia. By 1841, nearby plantations began to fail. Workers claimed tools would vanish overnight, livestock would go mad, and strange marks would appear on doors. 3 lines carved deep, always in the same pattern. Preachers said it was the devil's sign. The older slaves said it was a warning. He's coming for the masters. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from. Because this silence wasn't just superstition, it became a plague of fear that reshaped an entire region. A letter dated April 1842, written by a merchant named Tobias Crane, described the phenomenon. The air itself feels watchful. We hear nothing, yet it feels as if something listens back. In one town, a slave auction was disrupted when every animal in the square, the horses, the dogs, even the birds, froze and faced the same direction. A few seconds later, a gust of wind blew through that carried the smell of ash. When it passed, the auctioneer's voice was gone, literally gone. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. He never spoke again. From that day, they called it the Curse of Silence. And though no one saw Silas, his name became legend. Parents warned their children, "Don't mock the quiet ones. They listen to the dead." But the silence wasn't only fear. Some claimed it protected them. A group of escaped slaves hiding in the Ogeechee forests swore that when bounty hunters came close, the woods fell deathly quiet, and the men's torches blew out all at once. When the silence lifted, the hunters were gone, leaving only their boots behind. By 1843, even newspapers began mentioning it indirectly. "Unnatural hush in the lowlands," one headline read. "Locals speak of a spirit man who walks without sound." Preachers tried to explain it as judgment. The planters called it madness, but the enslaved whispered a different story, that Silas wasn't haunting them. He was freeing them, one master at a time, until no whip dared crack again in the night. Would you have believed in the curse, or followed the silence to see where it led? In 1844, a man named Colonel Barrett came from Savannah claiming he could rid Georgia of its haunting. A former soldier turned bounty hunter, Barrett prided himself on killing legends, or as he said, men that fools turn into ghosts. He'd heard of Silas the Silent and saw not a spirit, but an opportunity. Barrett arrived at what remained of Coldwater Plantation, now a wasteland of weeds and charred wood. The locals watched him pass without a word. They didn't warn him. They didn't have to. Everyone who tried to find Silas ended the same way, vanished, leaving only silence behind. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from, because what Barrett faced next would turn the hunter into part of the story he mocked. He set up camp near the old oak tree, the one that had survived the fire. Beneath it, he found a strange pattern carved into the earth, concentric circles of ash that seemed to pulse faintly under moonlight. He spat, muttered about Negro, witchcraft, and pitched his tent right beside it. That night, he heard nothing. Not the insects, not the frogs, not even his own heartbeat. The silence came like a tide. His horse bolted. The fire dimmed. Then came the sound. Not a scream, not a whisper. Something in between, like air moving through hollow bones. Barrett drew his pistol. "Come out!" he barked. But the voice that answered wasn't one of man or beast. It came from behind. Him, low and calm. "Do you believe in pain?" He spun around. No one there. Only his own reflection in the glass of his whiskey flask, distorted by moonlight. And yet, the reflection was smiling. By dawn, the camp was gone. The sheriff's men later found his pistol buried 10 feet deep in the dirt, the barrel bent backward. Barrett's horse was discovered miles away, eyes wide, tongue torn out, as if it had tried to scream. All that remained of the colonel was a single page from his journal, scorched but legible. It read, "He is not a man. He is the silence between sins." After that, no bounty hunter, preacher, or lawman dared step near Coldwater again. The plantation became a forbidden place, overgrown, untouched, and humming with an unseen stillness that made the air feel heavy. Some nights, travelers said they could see a man's shape standing under the oak, watching the road. And if you stopped too long, the world around you would go completely quiet, as if waiting for you to speak the wrong word. Would you have stayed to see who stood beneath that tree, or left before the silence found you first? By 1846, Coldwater Plantation was little more than a burned memory, a skeleton of its former cruelty. The main house was gone, the fields overrun, and nature itself seemed to reject the soil. But even ruin draws the curious. Children from nearby hamlets would sneak in at dusk, daring one another to touch the blackened earth or peek through the broken walls where the master's house once stood. They called it playing in the ashes, and every game ended the same way, with someone hearing him. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from, because what these children uncovered would prove that some places never stop feeding on the living. The first was Ruthie Mayfield, age 8. Her friend said she found something under the old oak, a piece of bone carved into the shape of a hand. She laughed, held it up, and said, "Maybe this is the slave that killed the master." That night, her mother woke to find Ruthie standing at the foot of her bed, covered in soot, eyes wide, whispering the same word over and over. Silent, silent, silent. By morning, she was gone. Only footprints remained, leading back toward Coldwater. After that, the others swore they'd seen Ruthie again, sitting on the scorched porch steps, humming to herself. But when they called her name, the sound around them vanished. No wind, no crickets, no heartbeat. Just the thick, suffocating hush that always came before it appeared. Within months, 5 children had disappeared near Coldwater. The sheriff blamed wolves. The parents blamed superstition. But the old folks, the ones who still remembered the night Silas vanished, said otherwise. They said the children had disturbed the line between pain and peace. They said Silas had been waiting. A preacher from Macon came to bless the land. He read from Scripture, tossed holy water on the ground, but the water hissed, turned black, and began to boil. The preacher fell to his knees and screamed, "This place ain't haunted by the dead. It's haunted by the living that refused to die." Weeks later, his body was found near the same oak, his face frozen mid-prayer, mouth full of ashes. Locals began to avoid the road altogether. They said if you passed too close after sunset, you'd hear a child humming from the trees, the same tune Ruthie used to sing before she disappeared. Some nights, travelers saw small handprints in the soot near the fence posts, fresh and perfect, like something had crawled out from under the ground, still playing, still waiting for someone else to join their game. Would you have followed the laughter into that silence, or would you have kept walking, pretending not to hear? By the fall of 1847, Sheriff Amos Talbot was the only man in Coldwater County who still dared ride near the plantation. He said it was his duty. Others whispered it was guilt, because he'd once ignored the cries from that land when Silas was alive. Now, the cries were returning. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from. Because what happened on Amos Talbot's final ride was written in no report, and yet every man who's heard it swears it's true. It began with hoof prints, small ones, too small for a grown man, but too heavy for a child. They circled the old gate, then vanished into the fog that rolled across the ash field. Talbot followed the trail, his lantern flickering in the damp air, his horse trembling beneath him. He muttered prayers between his teeth, though his voice shook. The deeper he rode, the quieter it became. No wind, no owls. Even the sound of his horse's hooves faded, like the earth itself had stopped listening. He called out, "Ruthie? Anyone there?" But only the echo of his own voice came back, distorted, lower, wrong. Then he saw it, a figure standing near the old oak. Too tall to be human, too still to be alive. Its arms were long, its body stretched like a shadow that refused to fade. The lantern light trembled on its face, but there was no face. Just smooth, pale skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. Sheriff Talbot dropped the lantern. Darkness swallowed the field. And then, from that darkness, came a whisper that felt more like breath against the back of his neck than sound. Silas. The horse bolted, throwing Talbot to the ground. He crawled through the dirt, reaching for his pistol, but his hand struck something soft, a mound. He brushed it aside and found a skull. Small, child-sized. When they found his horse days later, it was standing at the county line, reins torn, eyes wide, shaking like it had galloped through hell itself. Talbot's body was discovered miles away near the burned chapel. His throat wasn't cut. It was closed, like the skin had grown over his mouth, sealing him in silence. In his hand was a rusted locket, the initials SMIOs carved inside. Silas's mark. After that, the county declared Coldwater Plantation forbidden ground. No lawman entered again. But every November, on the night Talbot died, the townsfolk still hear the sound of hooves echoing through the fog. One rider, one lantern, moving toward the plantation, then stopping. They say it's the sheriff, still chasing the silence that finally caught him. Would you have followed that whisper too, or turned your horse around before the fog touched your face? The land where Silas once bled had grown over with weeds and whispers. The barns had fallen. The house was a skeleton of charred beams. And no one spoke the name Coldwater aloud, but the earth remembers. And in 1863, when war finally reached Georgia, that memory awoke. Hit that subscribe button and comment below what state you're watching from, because this is where Silas the Silent returned, not as a man, but as something far older than flesh. Union soldiers, tired from marching, set up camp on the edge of the Coldwater fields. They found the soil soft, black, and strangely warm, though frost covered every other acre for miles. That night, their fires burned low, their voices hushed. One soldier, Private Elias Moore, wrote in his journal that he heard a sound like someone breathing through the ground. He thought it was wind at first. It wasn't. At midnight, their horses screamed, not the cry of pain, but terror. The soldiers woke to find the animals bleeding from their mouths, their eyes wide, fixed toward the tree line. There, half glimpsed through the fog, was a figure, barefoot, tall, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. It didn't walk. It glided. When they called out, it turned, and though its face was half burned, they could see the shape of the mouth, sewn shut by scars. No eyes, no voice, no mercy. The Silent One had returned. By dawn, only 3 men remained alive. They spoke of hearing the same whisper that had once haunted Sheriff Talbot. "Use me, and I will unmake you." When the Union Army sent another patrol days later, they found the camp abandoned, except for a single tree, marked by dozens of rusted belt buckles hanging like trophies. Below them, 3 graves, each stone carved not with names but the same single letter, S. After the war, the government surveyed the land for reconstruction, but every man sent there fell ill. Some struck mute, others driven mad by nightmares of a faceless figure whispering through the soil. By 1870, the county officially declared the Coldwater acreage uninhabitable. The locals called it the Field of Silence. Even now, no birds sing there. Hunters say their dogs refuse to cross the boundary, and every few years, someone brave or foolish drives out to the ruins at night, only to come back days later, unable to speak a word. They say Silas's vengeance was never about blood. It was about silence, taking from others the voice they once used to command him. So now I'll ask you, if that silence still lingers in the soil, and you stepped upon it tonight, would it let you walk away? Or would the ground itself remember your voice and take it for its own?